Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. And first we're going to talk about the southern part of Donetsk direction, about the settlement city by the name of Krasnogorovka. As you know, during the previous days the Russians managed to conduct a very successful offensive operation with the use of significant number of armored vehicles and personnel, and they managed to establish control over the first buildings and the streets in this area. Probably currently the Russian progress is much bigger in comparison with the situation you can see right now in front of your screens. From the other side, today we got additional report that the Russians launched another offensive operation a little bit to the south of the main direction from Krasnogorovka, and the Russians were attacking along this line from Marinka towards the main stronghold of the armed forces of Ukraine in the fields between Georgievka and Krasnogorovka. So the video we received from the Ukrainian sources, this video was published by the 46th Air Mobile Brigade of Armed Forces of Ukraine, and on this video we can see lots of strikes with FPV drones against the Russian offensive team. On this video we can see significant number of armored vehicles, more than 5, and some of them were damaged and blocked by the Ukrainians. Some of them managed to reach the first positions of the Ukrainian defense belt. According to geolocations we have, according to this video, the Russians, let's say the latest, the edge position the Ukrainians shown us with the FPV drone strike took place in this area. This is it. So basically the Russian armored convoy was moving along this line, reached this area, and probably the Russians managed to move even further, and this is the last geolocation we got from that video. So we see that the Russians are pushing the Ukrainians not just in this inside of Krasnogorovka, but also the Russians try to solve the issues with the strongholds among the fields. When talking about Krasnogorovka itself, Ukrainian sources reported that without any geolocations, without any improvements, without anything, they reported that 3rd Azov Brigade conducted a counter-offensive operation, and as a result of counter-offensive from Azov Brigade, they managed to force the Russians to fall back, and they restored control over the territory. For now, we're not going to adjust the map to make any changes, because just words is not enough for us for making any changes on the ground, but we need to keep in our mind that the 3rd Azov Brigade currently operates in this direction as well. The Russians from their side published some geolocations of additional destroyed armored vehicles inside of the village, on the southern part of Krasnogorovka. For example, on this scene we can see destroyed tank of armored forces of Ukraine that probably the Ukrainians were trying to use to counterattack the Russians, but the tank was successfully destroyed, very likely with the attack of FPV drone. Furthermore, the Russians were bombing the central part. On this video we can see the main supply roads that Ukrainians were using for redeployment of forces from the central part to the southern, and the Russians attacked this territory with artillery, with FPV drones, and as a result of strike, another Ukrainian, let's say evacuation light vehicle was destroyed. Furthermore, the Russians continue bombing the central industrial part of Krasnogorovka with very heavy fire. On this video we can see another use of FAP 1500, and as you can see this is the only industrial area inside of Krasnogorovka, and this is the area of the main concentration of Ukrainian forces, of temporary, let's say bases, headquarters, the area that Ukrainians used to coordinate the clashes on this direction. And as we can see, this area is under very heavy fire. Very likely the Ukrainians will not be able to hold for a very long time under such a pressure, and if the Russians continue using the same tactics in Krasnogorovka as they used to use in Avdiivka, obviously sooner or later the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back under such a heavy pressure. From the other side, the Russians continue pushing not just on the southern part of Krasnogorovka. The Russians increase the pressure towards Nivolskoye, and some mappers today publish updates that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation that they managed to conduct 2 days ago, managed to establish control over additional 3 lines in direction of Nivolskoye itself. So according to some mappers, currently this territory is under complete Russian control. Based on that, we can make a conclusion the Russians got as close as possible to Nivolskoye itself, and probably even today we're going to start receiving updates about the clashes inside of the village. And once again, if the Russians are able to establish control over Nivolskoye, then the Russians will secure the flanks and will be able to get, let's say, secured roads for further offensive operation to Krasnogorovka from the north, and then this is going to be a pincer. Furthermore, we got more evidence of active phase of Russian assault operation over Krasnogorovka. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians published significant number of videos, geolocated updates, confirmations of significant number of destroyed Ukrainian artillery systems somewhere behind Krasnogorovka in the areas that Ukrainians were using to support and supply their forces in Krasnogorovka and Nivolskoye. Most of the artillery systems were destroyed. For example, in this video, we see another D-20 howitzer position that was discovered by the Russian drone Zala, and after that the Russians conducted successful artillery strike, probably with Krasnopol, and that artillery system was destroyed. So once again we see the Russians first managed to suppress the Ukrainian, let's say, artillery, short-range artillery. Then the Russians conducted successful attack to Nivolskoye. The Russians during the previous days managed to establish the foothold in the southern part. They suppressed the forces in the central area, and also the Russians launched another attempt to attack the strongholds in the fields between Krasnogorovka and Georgievka. And very likely, if the Russians managed to establish control over the southern part, the main supply road that goes from Krasnogorovka to these strongholds was cut off by the Russians. Now we are moving to Bakhmut-Artyomov's direction, to Avdiivka direction. We have lots of updates from this territory as well. We have a lot of geolocations, icons, and so on. According to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Orlovka. Yet we haven't received any geolocations, but lots of reliable mappers provided this update. We have such a report from Syriac. We have the same report from Rybar. We have additional reports from Lost Armor Resource. So we can say that today the only thing we're going to receive is the flag above Orlovka with the confirmation of control, or the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation will provide us additional information. Also, we got some geolocations confirming the further Russian progress towards Orlovka. This is the Russian infantry heading from Lastochkino to Orlovka under the Ukrainian cluster fire. A little bit to the north, the Russians were attacking with armored vehicles in direction of Orlovka, but some armored vehicles was attacked by the Ukrainians, and as you can see, another personal carrier of armored forces of Russian Federation was damaged and destroyed by the Ukrainians. From the other side, the Ukrainians were forced to fall back from Toninka. After Orlovka was captured by the Russians, the Ukrainians took a decision to abandon their positions and to fall back from Toninka towards the village by the name of Umanskaya. This is the next defense belt that Ukrainians will try to hold as long as possible. So this is Umanskaya, and the Ukrainians abandoned their positions to move there. And during the withdrawing process, the Russians managed to destroy a significant number of armored vehicles that Ukrainians were forced to discover during the retreat process. Interesting details are coming from Berdychi. According to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over Berdychi as well, and this territory from now on is under complete Russian control. The same story. Currently, we're expecting to receive the videos with Russian flags inside of the village, and after that this is going to be complete collapse and complete defeat of the Ukrainian forces on this direction. Additional sources are saying that because of that fact that the Russians established control over Berdychi and managed to cut the main supply road, supply road, and because of that fact that the Russians established control over complete Orlovka, they managed to establish complete control over this territory. The Ukrainian forces, not in Semyonovka but in the fields between Berdychi and Orlovka, this territory appeared in a cauldron, say at least in operational encirclement. We are talking about these forces. We can't say the exact number of forces of armored forces of Ukraine on this area, how many troopers are there. There still have some evacuation road between Semyonovka and the fields, but these territories from now on is under complete Russian FPV and artillery control. And the Ukrainians who are currently located in this area appeared at least in operational encirclement. And the number of forces varies probably from 2 till 500 soldiers. And this is very critical for the situation for them. So when talking about the global scope of the global situation, we need to say that this defense belt was collapsed by the Russians. And we are talking about defense belt, Toninka, Orlovka, Berdychi. The next defense belt that Ukrainians have on this direction is the defense belt between Ocheretina, Solovyova, Novoselovka, Persha, and then Karlovka Water Reservoir, Karlovka itself. So this is the next defense belt, and after that, the next defense belt goes through Novoalexandrovka, Progress, Zhelanna, Novogrodovka, Селидово, Tsukurina and Kurakhova. So the Ukrainians probably will try to slow down the Russians on this direction, on the next defense belt. But if the situation continues develops the same way as we see right now, very likely the Ukrainians will not be able to hold the Russians for a very long time. Because the next town the Russians are going to capture, of course, is the village by the name of Semyonovka. And this battle is not going to take a lot of time because the Russians will attack this territory from many directions. And sooner or later, the entire area will collapse. Furthermore, there is another city by the name of Umanska, but this village also will be captured by the Russians very fast, and Yasnobrodovka as well. Now we are moving further to Pokrovsk. Today we got another video of Lancet strike. To be more precise, the let's say the video confirmation of the results of another strike in these areas. You can see the Russians destroyed the entire building, or probably government office, with Iskander or some ballistic missile, and as a result of that strike, we see significant, let's say, explosions, significant damage, which confirms that more or less the Russians are moving focus further to this stronghold. Furthermore, we got another geolocate confirmation from Dobropolye, another city, another town that located to the north of Pokrovsk, another area that Ukrainians use for concentration of their forces. As a result of Iskander strike, another temporary position was destroyed. Now we are moving to Bakhmut-Artyomovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything from this area, including no report about additional progress in the central part. The only video we have is FPV drone strike against the farms that located to the south of Ivanovska, which also confirms certain movement of Russian focus further to the west and the southwest of the settlement. So the clashes for this territory continues. We haven't received anything from Siversk, southern Kupiansk or northern Kupiansk direction, but we have very strange reports from Kherson direction. The Ukrainians during the previous night, during the previous evening, conducted, as they were saying, very dangerous and very, let's say, dangerous, landing operation, special operation, and the Ukrainians were planning and trying to land their infantry and troopers on tender speed. But the Ukrainians were discovered and destroyed, and as a result of those clashes, the Ukrainians lost around 20 soldiers, and one was captured, and they lost 4 boats. The Russians haven't lost anything. And that was weird, and the most weird thing to me was that before that operation, let's say a few hours before that operation, the Ukrainians announced, and it was like published in many, let's say, reliable sources, and many were probably even official sources, they published updates that the Russians, you need to expect something very interesting and something very special in Kherson direction. So basically, before that operation, let's say 4 hours before that operation, the Ukrainians announced about upcoming very special and very cool operation, and that was very weird to me. And after 4 hours later, we got significant number of photos, video confirmation of destroyed Ukrainian group. So that was very weird, to be more precise, from my side. Now we got additional updates from Kiev, and the corruption in Ukraine continue developing. For example, on this video we can see a guy, he is serving in Ukrainian army, and he was talking about Ukrainian demobilization. If you remember, a few days ago we were talking about the fact that Ukrainians adopted demobilization law, that they're about to start the demobilization. It's currently unknown how many soldiers they're going to demobilize, but according to this guy, the corruption reached this let's say field as well, and he was saying that if you want to be demobilized, you need to pay $5,000. So from, let's say, the purpose to increase the reputation of authorities among the Ukrainians, using demobilization, basically this process was turned into another corruption schema, where some authorities, including Zelensky, are able to get additional money from Ukrainians, from poor soldiers. And the main problem is that they will pay $5,000 and probably they will be demobilized, but nobody gives you some guarantees that you will not be returned back to the line of combat contact within, let's say, 3 or 5 or even 10 days. So months or even 5 days. Furthermore, we got some updates about possible help from the Pentagon considering tapping last source of Ukraine military fundings as Congress tells on additional aid. Probably this will, let's say, give Ukrainians some time, but we can't tell for sure whether it's going to give, let's say, lots of time for Ukraine and Ukrainian region. Furthermore, based on the report, based on the, let's say, Macron, let's say, report regarding the sending forces to NATO. We see the rising conflict between Scholz and Macron about the fact the Germany is not going to send any, let's say, troopers to Ukraine, but they ask Macron to send additional help and military help, and to do this faster. If we compare France and Germany, yes, we can make a conclusion that Germany helps Ukraine a lot. But when talking about France, I don't remember the last military package they sent to Ukraine. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.